Happy New Year to everyone. It's been a year, right? I was just reflecting back on what would be an appropriate video to make. What should I, talk about next? I was brought about this thought about our ancestors. And I'd like to begin with an aspect of or at least of my healing journey that took me on a journey from being despising my ancestors to accepting them and finally to be grateful for their presence. So the core root of why I felt so much despise for my ancestors it could be, immediate family members or relatives. And how that shaped my perspective about myself was a long journey to unpack and unfold. So always growing up, I'd grown up with this notion that it would have been better if I were a boy. Now, what's hurtful about statements like these is, at least for a young child, they would often okay, so let me take you to a visual that I have right now. So when you talk about constructing a building, right? So my father's construction in the construction business. So he's always talked about making a building earthquake proof. So I'd gone to one of his projects, and they dug a hole in the ground which was really deep, and they would usually lay down like really big pillars made of cement and stainless steel rods that would serve as the base, uh, and there used to be like a rectangular grid around it to serve as the foundation underneath the building that would help it to observe shocks. It not observe, basically absorb all shocks that might come due to seismic activity, right? So why this is pertinent over here is often there are stories that are passed down through generations, and they're done in such an unconscious way, in an unaware way, that we don't even realize how much they impact us. And one of those stories for me growing up was, it would have been great if you were a boy, and that since you're a girl, we probably wouldn't have preferred to have you. Now, growing up, I knew that conversation, and I feel a lot of women recognize this pain, recognize the story of having our mere existence being questioned, being eroded off, being told as something not worthy of existing, while we would worship goddesses, and we would say that, dear goddess, please protect us, please bestow us with wealth, please gave us wisdom, at least in the Hindu traditions. So that cognitive dissonance started to really affect how I see myself. So my name was Mahnisaa, right? So every time that story would loop around in my head, I developed a self deprecating joke that I'm just a letter away from being a boy. That if you drop the last A, I'm basically Manish, and that I'm fulfilling my ancestors' wishes that way of being a boy. So growing up, I was very soft, very feminine, very loving, very caring, and that boundless love, care, affection for everybody, everything around me, even nature. Because I remember I had a stretch in my life wherein I did not take showers. Like I took a bath, okay. I wasn't disgusting or anything. I did not take showers because I dread that the amount of water you consume while you take a shower and its impact on the water reserves, and how you know there are places that have drought or people that don't have water to drink or just to carry out the basic amenities. And here I am taking like an hour worth of shower. I'm utilizing this resource, and throwing trash on the streets. So I like picked up multiple small habits wherein I would carry trash home, and my mother used to scream at me because why do you get the world's trash at my house? I would not take a shower. I would only bathe with a bucket and a tumbler or tumbler. I would only bathe with a bucket. Measure the time I'd spend in the washroom taking a bath. I I would not pluck flowers off any tree, and I would not buy flowers at all because I used to think that it's absolutely barbaric that there's a flower on the tree that feels so natural, and I can still appreciate its beauty while it's on the tree where it belongs. And out here, I'm, for my personal greed and my personal need, I'm just like plucking it. I would collect flowers once they've like fallen down. So we had a garden, and we had like beautiful hibiscus trees. So every time the flower would naturally wilt off and drop to the floor, I would wait for it, and that is when I would, use it for me to appreciate, to smell, to keep it in my books. Just give it to my sister. So, with that boundless, ever flowing bounty of love that I had for every person, creature, the subliminal message that I got is that this very essence of you is disgusting, because your essence is disgusting because you're a woman, right? And in order to feel loved and accepted, growing up, my early strategy was to accept what messages I was hearing, right? So there might be something wrong with me, that it is a man's world out there. We are inferior creatures, so I accept that. But as a woman, when you have your own existence questioned, it leads to a very fragmented sense of self. And I think that is something that I experienced for a vast majority of my life. When I got into school, and I saw the same femininity that was, for example, ostracized back home by relatives and sisters, I found that love to give to people and individuals in either relationships or friendships in a very unregulated way, right? Often, when we are a source of something, we don't realize that you can remain a source if you have plenty for yourself and you distribute the excess to others. But with that lack of that understanding, the same femininity, the same beauty, the same innocence that I had, through harsh experiences, harsh lessons, I saw all of that erode. And the subliminal messaging through external experiences and through the message at home that this is a weakness, through confirmation bias, just got strengthened. So instead of thinking of being Manish as a joke, I actually started embodying being Manish. So I thought, if they want to have a son, I will become that son. Now, there's nothing wrong with having internal balance, right? You go out in the world, and it's absolutely true, it's cutthroat. You need to have survival instincts. You need to have masculine instincts, wherein you need to have passion, you need to have drive, you need to have all things that are need to conquer, per se. And I'm not really convinced about these qualities being inherently masculine. I think this is just how new age psychology, or even it's considered masculine, wherein I don't particularly agree, but just to make it more easier to follow and understand, we'll label these qualities as masculine, because I think these qualities have nothing to do with gender. These qualities have nothing to do with the body you're inherited. It doesn't particularly make sense to me, because these are attributes. These are not biologically plausible to be more in one gender and less in the other, or these qualities that seem so-called contradicting are not actually contradictory in nature. They're forces of opposite ends of the spectrum that are meant to balance each other so that you live holistically. But leaving out the nuance, when you actually go out in the world and you see that, okay, these are certain qualities that are needed to succeed, and having a good financial and backing in terms of career growth, money is essential. I knew that I'd chosen and unknowingly made the choice of molding myself into someone who discarded inherent qualities in me that were the core essence of who I was as a person, right? So now this conditioning was going, this priming, this conditioning was going on throughout my time in high school and a bit in medical school as well. So I did my MBBS from India. I'm currently in Boston. It's really cold out. That's why I'm like filming this indoor. It's lovely, but it's cold. So while this identity strengthened within me, I'd completely foregone my true essence, the purity that I always had within me, as a sense of bargain or a means to exceed in this world, because I thought, at least what the narratives told me and what my experiences kept emphasizing to me, that in the short run, people who do exhibit these traits succeed, and that having traits on the opposite end of the spectrum. So, as a doctor, if I spend a minute with my patient, holding her hand, listening to her share her grief of being a patient with a terminal illness, makes me incompetent. When you keep hearing that, keep listening to that, and you know, the pain of processing emotions of others is also real, right? So this is, a lot of times we look at these qualities of listening to other people, caring for other people, being there for other people, supporting them, as something that are inferior, but the amount of emotional, mental, physical, spiritual strength that is required to actually do these things for another individual is immense. And doing that for multiple patients while you're working physically and you're cognitively also engaged is not an easy thing. It is not something that weak people do. but but these things are challenging to articulate, right? Because these are lived experiences. How do you convey an experience to someone that I have a patient who prayed for my well-being because she saw that there's this girl who's holding my hand and taking me across the hospital to another subunit because I need to get checked, because my daughter is in the gynec department and I'm owed to take care of her, but nobody's taking care of me. And this little girl, I don't know what is happening to her. Why is she staying back after her duty hours and making sure that I get a consult done while I'm in the hospital as well? When a person like that feels taken care of, praise for your health, that's having impact, and that's touching people's lives in real time. And we don't recognize that in the moment because we're so sadly disconnected to our true essence. So while these stories were going on and I was battling, so I was very internally torn, right? Do I keep showing up in this persona of a very hyper independent masculine woman who is cutthroat, who is successful, who knows what she wants, goes for it. And there was this basic core nature of me that wanted to be kind, that wanted to always help, to listen, to take a moment to sit with people and be a witness and a compassionate presence in their life. I felt a complete tug of war within me at each moment in my life. At least I think for at least 4 years, 4 to 5 years, constantly. That my true nature was something to be disgusted by, and qualities that meant external success, that meant tangible success that could be met, that could be measured by a metric, by grades, by marks, by money, or by, I don't know, accolades, was essential, and the other part was just when I actively began on my healing journey, I recognized the core dissonance that I had regarding this essence of mine was that I'd heard from my ancestors that being a woman is disgusting, and that I should probably be a boy. I should have been a boy, and it would have been great. So when you actually start getting at the root of your problems, at least for me, for a really long time, that meant so much anger for my very own blood. I would constantly blame them, would constantly say that you are the reason I have this fragmented sense of self. You are the reason that I do not value myself as a woman, that I do not value myself as a person, and that this emotional emptiness and this pit in my heart is all you're doing, and that you could have been better for me. Now, while I was going through this internal anger and angst, I was so consumed by it that I was blinded to their misery as well. And what I mean by that is, they were through. So now I don't know where it starts, right? But there was some inception point in our lineage where hatred towards femininity began, hatred towards womanhood began. It could be because of any reason, but it began. And it trickled down, trickled down, trickled down to such an extent that it became an identity in our lineage. And what I mean by that is that it became a way of living for everybody, irrespective of their gender. So when I look back at my mom, or when I look back at my grandmom, or even when I look back at my dad, I see that this thought process, this conditioning, did hurt me for sure, and it was passed down by them, but for sure. But it hurt them as well, in ways I can only quantify or understand in my lived experience with them. So I am their child. I know them for 25 years, and they've lived for at least 50 now. So I can, and if I leave out infancy and a bit of my teenage, I probably only actively understand and know probably 10 to 12 years of their life while I was in adolescence, or I became a young adult and I could understand their journey. So almost 35 years of their life, the same narrative damaged their sense of self, damaged their perception of life, damaged how they saw themselves and viewed the world. And the sad part about all of this was that they did not have the opportunity, the education, the tools, the resources to actually be liberated from that mindset. With that understanding, I was able to have a lot more peace and a sense of neutral recognition that this pain that we've inflicted on each other is just pain waiting to be addressed and released, and that blaming them does not liberate me or heal me in any way. It just prolongates the suffering. So when I set out to reclaim those parts of myself, I was able to hold space for them as they reclaimed those parts of themselves as well. So, for the first time in 50 years, my mum got to understand what it is like to be cared for. My father experienced emotional fulfillment and happiness beyond his role of financial caretaking, right? So it was no longer tied to only that, oh, if you bring money, then we're gonna love you. So having the courage to let down my pain actually opened portals and pathways for their healing. And it all happened in a very um, intended way, right? I actually set out to align myself to just take care of myself. That was the goal or intention, to be very honest. I did not have in mind that if I do so, the same grandmom that was incredibly mean to me growing up because she had so much internalized hatred for herself as a woman that she projected that on me, that the same grandmom, if I forgive and take care of her while she's sick and having major surgeries, that she would come to a sense of peace and understanding that this is my granddaughter, that this is my divine child. And I am getting a bit teary thinking about it, because it's we think about pain, being at the receiving end of pain, and how painful it is to be, you know um, being the one to whom pain is being inflicted on. But this entire journey of being angry to having an understanding to actually having the compassion to hold space so that things could get repaired, and having God's grace for making that happen for my immediate family through me was unintended. And when I see them having a different life, I just think that if I had just stayed there complaining, if I had just stayed there ungrateful, if I had just stayed there in my pain constantly, neither I nor would they have had the opportunity to be liberated from it, to actually imagine living a different life. And it's fascinating to me because a lot of pop culture psychology also mentions about, you can't change other people, which is true to a certain extent. Any transformation that happened in my immediate parents or my grandmom, that happens in my sister, as a result of my healing, requires their active consent. That is true. But that does not mean that you cannot be the ripple to make that happen, right? Because what happens when we think about being in a collective is we're so used to inflicting collective pain onto each other. I got hurt, so I'm going to hurt you so that you feel the same way I do. But once we heal, once we find balance, stability, love in our own lives, why do we get stringent with that? Why do we think that this is only something I will keep for myself and not share or become a source for others? Because, once you've gone through the journey of having a strong understanding of who you are as a person, and you serve as a source of inspiration or a source of healing for others, you no longer do it from a place of self-sacrifice, right? So this entire journey has taught me one major lesson is that there's obviously collective pain and there's collective healing, but it's an individual responsibility to preserve ourselves, be open to change and positive transformation, and then being open to spreading that to others. Because the loop doesn't close or doesn't end with just, oh, I've healed my traumas, I've healed my patterns, I've healed everything that was wrong with me, and now I'm free and I'm done. It doesn't work that way, because even if you don't intend, so in my case, my particular intention wasn't that, but the outcome was so beautiful. I, in 1,000 years, wouldn't have imagined that me having courage to reclaim my true, beautiful self, the self that loves people, the self that is pure, she's happy, she's kind. And that my journey to reclaiming that did not mean that I have to let go of my discipline, I have to let go of my ambition, I have to let go of my dreams, or I have to let go of success. It doesn't work that way. Things aren't as dichotomous as they're made to be. For you to be a truly balanced human, you will have both ends of the so-called polarity within you. And that makes for a more enriching experience of life. Because I'd gotten to a stage in my life where I was getting all the success and all the achievements that I wanted, but they felt empty. And they felt empty because my way of relating to people around me had changed into an extremely defensive approach. Because often, when you don't know how to self-preserve, you go in this extreme mode of extremely protecting yourself because you feel drained. Often when you're a source, you will be surrounded by people who need something from you, right? So now, as long as the exchange is mutually beneficial, it's a different thing. But growing up, I did not know how to regulate that, and I just went into the opposite direction of sacrificing myself to serve others. And when that did not yield anything, I went on to the other extreme of being extremely protective of myself and not engaging with anybody at all. And while I've been on both extremes, I know that those lessons and that journey was important because it taught me that true fulfillment, true healing comes right in the middle. It comes from being open to your own healing, to being to sharing with those who are open and receptive to change themselves. So in this case it was my parents, my grandmom, and then letting that ripple out in the world, which I am doing through this video. Because it's important for us to recognize that once we take accountability for our healing, we grow into our beautiful selves. That journey wasn't the one that we completely took alone, right? So at least in my case, at each stage of my life, I had someone help me. So and even if there's nobody to help you in person, there are people and resources that you do take help of indirectly through social media or in person human interactions. So none of our journeys of healing, even though there are moments that they do feel that you are by yourself, you're alone, that's just a temporary facade. You're never alone in your healing journey. You always have help, and that help got you out of the pit. So when you're on the other side of the pit, it's important you reach back down to draw others with you, because that is the only way how we transmute collective pain into collective love. I think I do not expect this to be the message that I would be recording today. I had a different theme, a different direction in mind, but I'm so happy with the new year that this is a lot more hopeful. Keep believing in yourself, keep taking on that journey, because we all envision a beautiful world, right? We all envision peace, love, harmony, and it's always within our reach to grab it, amplify it, and within our reach to spread it to others, spread it to those who are willing. And with time, we keep praying that there are more people who are willing. I think that feels complete. Happy New Year, and I really hope that you find inspiration and courage to take in account that you can grow past the blame, you can take accountability, and you can be the one to change the genetic history of your family. Love you all. Bye bye.